happened, we were actually doing joint press conferences because we were still looking for Jasmine. And so from minute one in this case, we started working it together, which I believe is what helped us succeed in the end, because my office was there with them for every step of it. So when we were drafting search warrants and we are going through the evidence and we're figuring out, well, hang on, there's a hole here, there's a hole here. It was a step-by-step process that we did together. And quite frankly, up until this week, we were still putting pieces of the puzzle together. There were things that we had not thought about until trial really got going. And we realized, we think probably this is what happened that we hadn't thought about before. But it was a joint effort. Our experts were fabulous in these cases. I mean, you've got the medical examiner for Hamilton County, who is one of our most significant public servants. Anybody that watched him testify, he's amazing. He's unbiased, but he's thorough. And so he and our cell phone expert, who really could track Jason's location throughout this entire crime, I think are what put the pieces together. But the joint effort between the Chattanooga Police Department and my office is what caused this case to get to trial quickly. We were committed to get this done for the family, and we did. And so we're very happy.
Whenever Joshua Weiss came out, opening statements day one, and said, Jason did it, this is a voluntary voluntary manslaughter case, did y'all know?
First time we'd ever heard it.
So how did that impact you guys?
It affected us because we were really going to be methodical about proving identity, proving that it was Jason that did it, proving that it was intentional, going through, making sure we convinced the jury that this is him in this photograph. Well, then they admit to it. So we really changed, we pivoted to only premeditation, which we believed we had from the beginning, but we focused a little more on premeditation, knowing that we still had to prove all of the other elements. But that was the first time that we had ever heard any defense from Jason Chen or his attorneys. It was shocking, to say the least. It was shocking to the family to hear an opening statement that he was actually taking some kind of responsibility, if you count it as that. And so it was pivotal for us to sort of say, all right, now we're working with this story of I did it, but it wasn't premeditated. It was an interesting moment as a prosecutor.
Yeah, and the question I'm going to ask you is first back to that cell phone testimony. And how much harder would this have been to prove this were 20, 30 years ago before all that data would have been available?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine having to prove this case without all of the cell phone records, the video footage from Walgreens and Walmart. That was crucial for this case. The technology aspect of this case is what secured us this conviction. Now, of course, we had the DNA evidence. Once you know that she was murdered in his apartment, in my opinion, you've got to overcome that as the criminal defendant. We could prove that with DNA evidence that she was murdered there. And so that is a big important place for the state to start a trial like this. We can prove she was killed in this apartment. Now what? And so we did have that from day one. We knew that no matter what, the apartment was a crime scene, and he was the only one that lived there. But certainly the cell phone aspects and the video aspects to this case really caused it to be a story that we could tell the jury, and that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, and speaking of that story, you came out in opening statement with the suitcase. That was the first thing the juror saw in this case. Talk about the importance of setting the tone right away.
Sure. Yeah, you can't understand this case without seeing that suitcase, both in person and in the photos from the side of Sut Creek Road. I mean, it is the epitome of why this case is so terrible. I hope in this county we never see any case like it. I mean, that's why it was so impactful to the community and why I think everybody's been following it. We have homicides here. Most of them are shootings. That's no secret. This hits different. And there have been a couple cases in the last couple of years that have hit different, but I don't think any has hit the community like this one has, because of the facts, because of the randomness, because of the questions that you have. Why did this happen? Why was it so egregious? We're very glad that the jury here in the sentencing phase agreed that it was egregious.
And we know that there was a limit on the amount of evidence that could be submitted to the TBI.
Yes.
Do you think that some of the unanswered questions that we have could have been answered had more been available to be submitted?
No, I don't. In TBI's defense in a case like this, when you have blood from a piece of carpet that we have identified as Jasmine Pace's, and then we send you a piece of carpet from 2 feet away, I'm not surprised that you're not going to test it. They would say, you've already got the answers on this piece of carpet from this bedroom. We're not going to retest it because that's a month, 2-month, 3-month long process. And so we can't just, when we give you the evidence to solve a case, we're not just going to keep testing items. We didn't need to know that the blood in the bathroom was Jasmine's because the blood in the bedroom was. And so I understand it's a balance. They can't test everything. They have to pick and choose. They don't have enough resources. Totally understandable. Is it hard sometimes that we have to justify that to juries and to defendants? Yeah, it is hard. It is hard for us to have to explain why this evidence wasn't tested. But when you think about it, it makes sense. Resources are limited. And in this case, we had just enough to prove the case.
And speaking of the jury, how do you think that they handled this case and their over week of service?
Oh my gosh, what a great jury. We were excited when we left Davidson County. We knew we had a good jury. We knew we had very intelligent people on our jury. We had we had engineers, we had social workers, we had a doctor on the jury. We were very, very excited about it. They asked more questions than I have ever seen a jury ask. They cared, they were committed. I knew that we had maybe it was a turning point in the trial when they had stopped taking as many notes because the first 5 days they were writing everything down, which is good. I want them to want to know everything they can about a case. We felt very good about our jury, and sure enough, it's the quickest verdict that I've had as a prosecutor or a defense attorney. And so it was surprising, actually. It was a moment in our office when they came back so quickly. But that speaks for the evidence in this case and the significance of what we put together for them.
Starting out before the trial even began, pre-trial hearings, the defense's efforts to try to break down how some of the evidence was found and try to muddy the waters a little bit.
Sure.
How much were y'all focused on making sure that y'all could bring the evidence forward and solidify it as very reliable evidence?
We've been comfortable with it from day one. The search of the apartment by the family is by law, doesn't violate any constitutional amendment because they are not government actors. They are not police officers. We knew that a jury would say, yeah, that makes sense that the family broke into his apartment. They thought their daughter was there. We could justify that from the beginning. And then our search warrants were clean. The police department did a great job, as good as they could have done in this kind of case, which is what the defense expert actually said, right? They came in after the apartment had been contaminated by Jason Chen himself, after he had gotten rid of evidence, after he had lived there for 2 days, after he had killed her. So we were comfortable with what the police department had done with the search warrants. Those are the steps that defense attorneys have to take, and we understand that. But we were comfortable from day one, and we don't think that there's going to be any issues on appeal in this case.
Just talk about, this case started right after you took office.
Yeah.
In the district attorney's office, and I could just tell, especially in that closing statement, just how passionate you were about this case. Talk about how this has just personally impacted you as you've grown to this role.
Yeah, it's a privilege as the lead prosecutor to get to know a victim through their family and their friends. And I've been with the Pace family for 2 years now, sort of walking alongside them through this process. There's been ups, there's been downs, there's been drama here and there. But throughout it, you really get to know who Jasmine Pace is. And Jasmine was a very kind, happy, vibrant young woman. And so even though I don't represent anybody, I represent the state of Tennessee and not the victim, it is a real honor to be able to stand up in court and speak on her behalf.
During closing arguments, you said that you had wished you called up the neighbor who screamed. Was there a reason why you decided not to?
Didn't know about her till this week. I did not know that she existed. It seems like maybe the police department had interviewed her, but it sort of fell through the cracks. And so my co-prosecutor and I did not know her name, did not know her information, had not spoken to her until the day she testified. We were able to talk to her in our office before she took the stand, but I simply did not know that she was a witness and had anything to say, and that worked out very well for us.
Yeah, and additionally, when the defense called up Jasmine's biological dad as well, he said he didn't expect that. Just how chaotic was that process?
We wanted to put as few family members through this process as possible. I think that Katrina, if she was standing here, would say she did not want to testify. She really did not want to take that stand, but we told her we needed certain pieces of evidence to come in through her, the location drop, the My Chevy app information. But we wanted to limit the amount of family members that had to take the stand to talk about Jasmine, especially based on some of the pieces of evidence, like the Facebook post. We didn't want to put the Facebook post in front of the jury, but at a certain point, you poke the bear, and we'll give you all the evidence that we have. But we wanted to limit that. That Travis was a good witness. I wouldn't have called him. I didn't want to put him through that, but he was a good witness.
Is there anything else that we didn't ask you that you feel like is really important?
I said this in closing argument, but I really do think that we talk too much about criminal defendants. The system in a lot of ways favors criminal defendants, and I understand it. Constitutional rights are very significant. I've been a defense attorney, but we've gone through the last 2 years and talked a whole lot about this criminal defendant. He's been on TV a whole lot. His face has been front and center in the newspaper, on the nightly news, and that's a shame. We really do need to make these cases about victims. They have families, they have rights. They matter. That's the easiest way to say it. And so I really, in my office, have cultivated an atmosphere where we talk about victims. We focus on victims. And when we have to, we'll argue with a defendant, but for us, it's about the victim.
And you also said it in your talking about how important it is to remember. Just tell us, what have you learned about Jasmine Pace these 2 years of being in networking?
She was very trusting. It seems that she was probably the kindest, sweetest soul in her family. No one, and I know that people say this, like when you lose someone like this, all of a sudden they become much better than they were. I don't think that's the case with Jasmine. I think she was very happy-go-lucky. I think she was sort of a ray of sunshine for all members of her family. That's really the feeling I get. You see photos, you see videos of her with her nieces, and she was just lively. And she had a whole lot ahead of her. She was beautiful. How this happened, I'll never really understand it. And I know her family won't either. And there's a lot of unanswered questions that are frustrating. I wanted him to testify so that I could ask him questions that I've been wondering for 2 years now. And I had a lot of them. And now we'll always have them. But I hope that her family can sleep just a little bit better tonight.
And do you have any, and you don't have to answer, but any why you think he did kill her?
Oh gosh, I've never doubted from minute one that he killed her. And I think it was, I've always thought it was with a lot of premeditation. In fact, I'm not so sure that he didn't lure her over there that night to murder her. They talked on the phone for 71 minutes that day, and nobody knows what that conversation was about. That's not a very common thing to do with someone who you live right down the street from. Her grandmother had just died. What was that phone conversation? I will always wonder, what did y'all talk about? How did you get her over to your apartment late at night? What could possibly have led to this kind of homicide? To me, the answer is that it was always going to be premeditated. That's what he was going to do, at least this once, if not more than that. And so I never had any doubt in my mind. There are cases where you're like, I need to really put this together and make sure I feel comfortable with a first degree or second degree murder. In this case, absolutely not. There are murderers, and then there's Jason Chen. It's a next level. It is the next level of murder. It is depravity.
And do you feel like maybe you guys perhaps stopped a serial killer in the making here, based on the fact he was talking to multiple other women hours after he killed Jasmine? Yeah,
the behavior is not that of a normal person. It's not. And it definitely gave me pause as we move forward. The life without the possibility of parole. I know that 51 years, he'd still be 74. I don't care. I think if you're able to do this when you're 22, you might be able to do it when you're 75 years old. So it means a lot to me to keep him in custody for the rest of his life, because I do think that the way that he did this is not normal. We good?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank y'all. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Long week.
All right, that was District Attorney Coty Wamp speaking about the sentence that was just handed down a little bit ago in a Hamilton County courtroom, that of life without parole to Jason Chen, who was convicted of premeditated first-degree murder in the death of Jasmine Pace. Some comments that we got from her came from learning that when the defense came out and said that they admitted that Jason Chen killed Jasmine Pace in their opening statements, that was a surprise to them. They did not know that was going to happen. And then also talking about how the witness who lived directly under Jason Chen, they didn't know about her until they found out she was going to be a witness for the defense that same day. And Coty Wamp said, and she said in her closing statement, that it actually helped the prosecution's case because it helped them fill in the timeline of Jasmine Pace's last hours, they believe. And I'm just going to go back in my notes just a little bit where we have that timeline written down. So we know that the neighbor heard a scream from Jasmine Pace at 2:11 a.m. And then at about 2:17 a.m. is when Jasmine Pace sent that message to her mother that contained, 2:18 a.m. that contained her pin location. So Coty Wamp believing that neighbor that took the stand that woke up to the sound of Jasmine screaming really helped solidify the timeline for the jury. We are possibly expecting for defense attorney Joshua Weiss to come out and speak. I'm monitoring that camera in case that happens. And if so, we will bring it to you live. We do have two crews down in the courtroom talking about this case for News Channel 9 at 5. This stream center has been very important while we've been giving you gavel to gavel coverage. But then what happens on our newscast beginning at 5 and then again at 6 is we take the most important parts of the day and kind of wrap them up and put them into one location where we can hear all of the different people, the family members of Jasmine Pace, Jason Chen's mother, and then Coty Wamp and Joshua Weiss and their arguments to the jury about why they believed he should get the sentence that he got today. Of course, the jury handing down life without parole. The other choice was life in prison with the possibility of parole after 51 years. So we'll give this just a minute more. We'll watch to see if the defense attorney comes out before we end this stream. If not, you can go to News Channel 9's YouTube page and watch all of the arguments there. All of the testimony, as well as the most important pieces of info that we learned from the stand, posted in their own clips. Thanks for joining us here in the News Channel 9 Stream Center.